Let's start the story from the very first events. The story opens with Tori and Kyle Breyer facing difficulty conceiving a child. Their bookshelves are filled with titles on fertility, showing their ceaseless efforts. One night, during another attempt, Tori feels a strange vibration that shakes the entire house. The couple looks outside and sees that some object has crashed near their property. Let's fast forward in time. A series of home videos shows a boy named Brandon gradually growing up. Later, Tori is playing hide-and-seek with the boy, who is now a little older. At school, Brandon answers a teacher's question, attracting the attention of a classmate named Caitlin. That night, back at the farm while Tori is painting, Brandon begins to sleepwalk. He goes down to the basement, drawn toward the very meteor that brought him to Earth. He begins to mumble in a strange, angry voice as he approaches it. Tori finds and calms him. The next morning, Brandon tries to start the lawnmower, but when it doesn't work, he throws it across the yard. Curious, he walks over to the spinning blade and puts his hand into it, stopping it instantly without a single scratch. Later, the family goes to a diner with Tori, Kyle, Aunt Marilee, and Uncle Noah. When Noah gives Brandon a toy gun, Kyle immediately scolds him. Kyle expresses his strong opposition to guns. However, Brandon demands to keep it. The family leaves the diner mid-celebration while a waitress watches them go. The next morning, Kyle tries to talk to Brandon, but the boy is distant. Kyle notices him chewing on a metal fork without damaging his teeth. Worried, Kyle takes him hunting. He shows Brandon how to use a rifle and brings up the changes in his body, especially after Tori discovered lingerie ads under his bed. That night, Brandon stalks Caitlin from outside her window while soft rock music plays from her laptop. She closes it, sensing someone is watching her. Suddenly, her mother, who is also the waitress from the diner, bursts into the room asking what's wrong. Caitlin can barely breathe. Meanwhile, back at the farm, Noah and Tori are searching for Brandon. They eventually find him. The next day at school, Brandon's teacher speaks with Tori while Brandon sits nearby, sketching strange drawings in his notebook. When Tori asks about them, Brandon silently closes the notebook and walks away. Back home, Kyle notices Brandon scaring the chickens. He asks Brandon, "Are you okay, son?" Brandon says that he is fine. They go back inside. Later, Tori and Kyle discover that all the chickens have been slaughtered. Tori blames a wolf. Kyle tells her in fear that a wolf couldn't do this. They can't rip a door off and break a lock. He thinks this might have been Brandon's doing. The next day at school, Brandon's class is doing a trust fall exercise. Caitlin, clearly uncomfortable after the previous night, refuses to catch Brandon. As a result, he falls to the ground. Although uninjured, Caitlin tells him she didn't help because he's a pervert. Brandon says, "Liar." The coach forces her to help him up, but when Brandon takes her hand, he suddenly crushes it, breaking the bones and making her scream. Later at the school office, Tori apologizes to Caitlin's mother, calling it an accident. The mother doesn't believe the explanation. She demands Brandon be arrested, but the sheriff refuses, saying the boy will only attend special counseling sessions at school. Brandon sits silently throughout the argument, his face somber. Caitlin's mother scolds him, calling him the son of a psycho. Tori speaks up to defend him. As the family leaves, Brandon looks back at the woman with a cold, threatening stare. That night, Brandon overhears Kyle and Tori discussing him in hushed tones. Feeling uneasy, Tori starts reading about meteors, but something outside catches her attention, a strange light pulsing from the barn. She rushes out to investigate and finds Brandon levitating in midair, bathed in the supernatural light of the meteor. As she approaches, he continuously repeats a haunting phrase. In a sudden drop, Brandon falls and cuts his hand on a jagged edge of the meteor. Tori rushes to help, trying to calm him down, but Brandon panics. He screams that he came from the sky, accuses her of lying to him his whole life, and bolts into the night. Tori immediately finds Kyle and tells him what Brandon discovered in the barn. Meanwhile, out in the darkness, Brandon furiously storms through the woods. With a scream of rage, he unleashes a beam of laser vision from his eyes. Later, Brandon appears in Caitlin's bedroom as she types on her computer, her broken hand in a cast. He tells her not to be afraid, insisting that she knows how special he is. Caitlin says her mother warned her not to talk to him. Brandon replies coldly. He declares his intention to take care of that problem. She begins to cry as he vanishes, leaving behind a single flower. At the diner, Caitlin's mother, cleaning up to close, feels that something is wrong. Stepping outside, she notices strange symbols etched on the windows, identical to the symbols in Brandon's notebook. The lights flicker. Suddenly, the windows explode inward. A shard of glass cuts her eye and she stumbles back, bloody and panicked. She grabs a baseball bat, ready to defend herself. A blur zips past. It's too fast to track. She swings wildly but hits nothing. In terror, she locks herself in the walk-in cooler. It is useless. A red-hot laser beam cuts through the steel door like paper. Brandon rips it off its hinges, steps inside, and stares her down. Then, he lunges. By morning, Brandon calmly tells his parents that everything is fine and the situation has been handled. Back at the diner, the sheriff and his deputy investigate the gruesome scene. They find the mangled remains of Caitlin's mother and one of Brandon's symbols carved into the glass. Later, Marilee, who is both Brandon's aunt and a school counselor, tries to talk to him, but he is distant, withdrawn. The session goes nowhere. Marilee considers calling the police. That evening, Kyle vents to his friends at a bar. He recounts the incident with Caitlin's broken hand and begins to voice his darkest fear that his son might be a monster. Meanwhile, at home, Marilee is in the bathroom when the lights start to flicker rapidly. Brandon appears at her house and says he needs to talk. He warns her not to speak to the police. He implies that doing so wouldn't be good for anyone. Marilee tells him to leave. He seemingly leaves, but a few moments later, he is standing outside her window watching her text Noah. Then, he returns in his costume and hides in her closet. Noah arrives, finds Brandon, and demands that he leave. He pushes him outside and threatens to tell his parents everything. They get into Noah's truck, but when Noah tries to push Brandon into the passenger seat, Brandon violently throws him against the garage door. Noah gets up, terrified, and speeds away, but he is certain that Brandon is following him. Suddenly, his truck starts to malfunction, swerving, jerking, losing power. Noah tries to restart his truck, but before he can react, Brandon appears directly in front of him. Terrified, Noah screams. Brandon easily lifts the entire vehicle into the air, levitating it for a moment before slamming it down with brutal force. The impact crushes the truck and Noah's jaw, leaving him mangled and barely alive. As Noah is dying, Brandon calmly walks over, kneels beside him, and uses his blood to draw another of his ominous symbols on the ground. Later, Brandon returns home, casually saying he had just been out playing soccer. He explains his missing shirt by saying he was bullied. That night, Kyle has a disturbing nightmare. He sees Tori finding the infant Brandon inside the crashed meteor and deciding to adopt him. But the dream takes a dark turn as baby Brandon's eyes glow red with deadly laser vision. A ringing phone pulls Kyle from his sleep. He and Tori rush to the hospital where they find Marilee in shock. She tells them that Noah is dead and that Brandon had visited her earlier. The pieces start to fit together in Kyle's mind. The next morning, they break the news to Brandon. His only response is, "Okay." Kyle grows more suspicious and accuses Brandon of being involved. Tori tries to calm him, but Brandon suddenly snaps, shoving Kyle into the pantry and smashing the door. Tori sends Brandon away. Later, Kyle finds Brandon's blood-stained shirt. He quietly takes it without Brandon noticing. When Kyle tries to apologize for earlier, Brandon again replies with a chillingly flat "okay." Kyle tells Tori what he found, but she refuses to believe him. Meanwhile, the sheriff examines the scene of Noah's death and compares it to the strange symbol from the diner window. They are a perfect match. That night, Kyle flips through old birthday cards from Brandon, trying to comfort Tori, who still denies the truth. The next day, Kyle decides to take Brandon hunting. As they head into the woods, the sheriff arrives at the Breyers' home with photographic evidence linking Brandon to the earlier incidents. Tori doesn't want to cooperate, but he promises to return. Out in the woods, Kyle and Brandon follow the tracks of a deer. Kyle lets Brandon walk ahead. Back at the house, Tori finds Brandon's hidden notebook. Inside, she discovers the same symbol from the diner window and the crash site. She also finds disturbing sketches. Brandon in his costume, a shard of glass in the waitress's eye, dead bodies, and a chilling phrase repeated over and over: "Take the world." Tori begins to panic. In the woods, Brandon studies the tracks while Kyle quietly raises his rifle and fires. The bullet hits Brandon's head and bounces off. Brandon turns, surprised. Kyle tries to reload, but it is too late. Brandon disappears among the trees, then reappears and flashes, darting through the air in his dark costume. Finally, he slams into Kyle, tackles him, and forces him to stand upright. Kyle stammers an apology, but Brandon does not hesitate. He unleashes a blast of laser vision from his eyes, shooting straight through Kyle's skull, killing him instantly. At home, Tori frantically calls Kyle's number, but no one answers. Finally, Brandon picks up. She demands to know where Kyle is. Brandon's reply is chilling. "He's gone. I'm coming home." Then he hangs up. Within seconds, Brandon smashes through the house at blinding speed, tearing it apart from the inside. Tori calls 911, her voice panicked, but the call is cut off mid-sentence. The sheriff and his deputy respond to the emergency. When they arrive, they find the house in ruins, walls collapsed and furniture obliterated. Tori stumbles outside trying to meet them. The sheriff calls out, but before she can speak, Brandon rockets into him and tears him to pieces in a spray of blood. Tori screams. She and the deputy retreat into the house, desperate for cover. Upstairs, Tori hides while the deputy loads her weapon and begins searching the wreckage. She radios for backup, her voice trembling. Suddenly, Brandon appears in front of her. Then, just as quickly, he vanishes, only to materialize right behind her. The deputy is killed off-screen. Tori hears the violence and freezes in place as Brandon hunts. She silently climbs out the window and falls hard to the ground. Injured but still alive, she crawls toward the barn, the only place left. Inside, she sees the meteor, the very one Brandon arrived in, and remembers how it injured him before. In desperation, she breaks a sharp shard from its side. Hiding among the shadows, she discovers the mutilated body of the waitress. She grips the shard tightly and calls out Brandon's name. He arrives, floating into the barn in his dark hood. Tori speaks softly, telling him how much he means to her. She removes his hood. Brandon looks at her with wide, innocent eyes. They embrace. She moves to stab him, but he catches her wrist instantly. With immense force, he knocks the shard away. Then, furious, he grabs her and soars into the sky. Higher and higher, until the farmhouse is just a distant dot below. He gives her one last look and lets go. Tori plummets. Brandon hovers in the air. An airplane is approaching very fast. The next day, debris from a plane crash is scattered across the countryside. News reports say the aircraft went down after hitting the farmhouse, killing everyone on board, including Kyle and Tori. Brandon sits nearby, casually eating a cookie, his face blank with feigned innocence. In the final scenes, the world is engulfed in flames, cities fall, millions perish. Brandon Breyer has arrived.